Hello, hello, and welcome to episode number 21 of the Wonder of Stuff podcast, broadcast live on Google Hangouts on air every weekend on a Sunday normally. This is the place, as ever, you'll find news, information and commentary on science, engineering and technology from the past week and beyond, and anything else that pops into our little human brains. As ever, my name is John Gardner, and normally I have two colleagues with me, Richard Smith and Ross Davidson. Fortunately, we're a man down so far at the start of the evening. Richard's going to join us later on, but Ross is here. Say hello, Ross.
Hello.
Jolly good. So, what we'll do is we'll carry on without Richard, and Richard will pop in at about 15 minutes time, something like that. But the first little story is Ross's anyway, and it's about the current situation and the current state with virtual reality, I believe.
Yes, yeah. So basically, this goes back to the start of the year when we were talking about what we think is going to be the interesting technology and the news type things this year. And my subject that I brought up was virtual reality. And I was lucky enough this week to get my hands on an Oculus Rift for a couple of nights. So I've been playing around with that. And basically, it really does work, is my first impression of it. So I played a few of the demos. There's a roller coaster one, which I took a wonderful video of my wife on the roller coaster.
Yeah, I know, and then you published it on Facebook.
Well, it has,
which she will love you for.
Yeah. She's not a fan of roller coasters, as you can probably tell if you've seen the video. But yeah, playing around with it, it's really, really quite good. I was interested to see how it would work with obviously wearing glasses. But with the Oculus, one thing that's quite good is they actually come with multiple sets of lenses. So there's a normal set of lenses, then another set of lenses that are designed for people who are nearsighted. And they pretty much work for me. My nearsightedness isn't that bad, so I could wear it without the glasses. I did try with the glasses, and it's a little bit uncomfortable. But once you get there and you get yourself focused, it is quite good. And playing around with some of the games, I played Half-Life 2, has to be done. And I bought a game called Alien Isolation, which terrified me, to be honest. One of the things I definitely felt with it was the people talk about presence, like this idea of having presence, and then you feel like you are there. But the thing that got me was the feeling of when you had the other characters in the game, when they were really close to you. You really felt that sort of invasion of sort of personal space. When they were right up in front of you, you actually felt that sort of like feeling of another person there, just because of the way that it worked, the 3D.
So I mean, Half-Life 2 obviously isn't a game specifically for the Oculus Rift. Was the other game written specifically for the...
No, I mean, the thing is, obviously, they're still development kits at the moment. You can run them in two ways. There's a direct to Rift that basically sends the signal direct to it, and you can duplicate your screen. So basically, you set up the Rift as an extended desktop. So most games are using that. They're not, you have to hack around in the configs and get them working. So it's a bit hit and miss getting them working.
And when you get it, if you do that, if you split it to the Rift and to the screen, presumably you get the stereoscopic viewer on the screen, do you?
Interesting enough, when you do the direct to Rift, it actually duplicates on the screen, so other people can look at your screens and they'll see what you're seeing.
Right.
And you see, and then when you do the extended desktop, it's actually sort of like it's the screen that's off your screen, so you can't see that. But I mean, a couple of things that I've realised as well is using a keyboard and mouse. When you know where your hands are, it's fine. But as soon as something says, "Oh, press Q," and you have to think about what buttons, it then becomes really difficult. Or if you move your hands and you lose your WASD keys, it's very difficult. So my sort of initial thought was, you have to have interaction. You have to be able to see your hands. And interestingly enough, since the start of the year, Valve who do the Steam platform.
Yeah.
They've teamed up with HTC. So there's an HTC piece of hardware called the Vive or the Revive. I'm not sure which one it is. But they're coming out and they're going to have a tracking system which is called Lighthouse. And what that is, you have 2 boxes that you put up in the corner of your room. And I don't know, it must be infrared laser or something like that. It scans your room, and you have 2 controllers, and it maps them on like 1-for-1 precision, so you can actually see it. And I think that sort of like interaction where you can see your hands, I think will take it to another level altogether. And also the interesting thing with the Lighthouse tracking system is that it knows where your walls are as well. So you can actually stand up in your room, and you can walk around your room, and as you walk towards a real life wall, it actually puts up a sort of a faded out grey wall in the virtual environment to stop you walking into anything. And then when you walk back, it disappears. So I think that's probably the one that I think will be the one to get. In terms of cost, I suspect it's going to be a lot more than the Oculus. There's obviously the Oculus. There's Sony are bringing out theirs for the PlayStation 4 as well, called Project Morpheus, I think it's called. But the HTC one looks to be the one to get. But yeah, my first impressions are it definitely will work. It really does.
Yeah,
work really well.
It's interesting that that Valve and in HTC one. I'm just wondering, because obviously the Steam OS is basically a Linux platform. I'm wondering if they've done some work on the Linux kernel to accommodate stuff like that. Because that would be useful.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've decided I am going to buy myself a new computer at some point, because my computer is just powerful enough to run it.
You can never have too many, Ross.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's interesting. People are talking about the next graphics cards that are coming out from AMD and Nvidia. They're saying they're going to have like hardware that's specifically designed for VR. So basically, everyone hold off from buying any kit at the moment. Wait until the HMDs come out and then work out which graphics card supports them best. Because I think the Oculus runs at 75 hertz, and the Vive, when it comes out, is going to be 90, so 90 frames a second. And I think that the resolution is slightly bigger as well. The Oculus is basically it's 1080p, but it's split between 2 eyes.
Yeah.
And I think the Vive is going to be, what's it going to be? I can't remember, but it's another level of resolution up.
Because
it's full 4K, but
yeah, I had the chance to use the Oculus Rift, and it was obviously a considerably older version. Andy Armstrong, who's been a contributor on Wonder of Stuff before, he's got a demo version, and I used it, but in case I used it, and I used it with my glasses on, and I really just didn't get it. You get the overall feel, but you don't get the clarity. And they've got 2 little focus wheels on either side. I don't know whether they've still got those on there. And I just couldn't get it right.
It's like a comfort thing or something. You move it further away, but I'm not sure how much it focuses.
I think I wasn't aware that there was different lenses, and I think that would have probably solved my issue. Plus the fact that Andy was just running his on a Mac. A MacBook, so I don't know how good, and it was quite an old. I think it was one of his older MacBooks. So, but for the general, the whole sensory thing, the whole perception of where you are, and even if you're very skeptical about the whole thing, and I'm skeptical about 3D, everything, but you can't tell your brain that that's what's happening, because it's just, the sensory information is going in, it's processing it, and it's you just think you get these feelings, you get these little feelings in the stomach, and that's
you do sort of get those moments that are like weird.
Yeah,
I think the sort of the tracking of the head movement. This is a development kit too. I don't think the first one came with this, but this one has a
Oh, Well, it. Oh dear, we seem to have a technical hitch here, and it looks like that the same thing has fallen Ross this week that happened last week, and that is that his computer appears to have blue screened, and he has dropped off air. That is a bit of a shame. So anyway, without further ado, let's see what we've got in the yeah, it's just me on my own. Okay, we'll try and recover. Richard has just joined us. Fortuitously, Richard has joined us while Ross has just dropped off because he's got a blue screen.
Oh, has he? Oh, not another one.
Yeah, so I was here trying to fill time on my own. But Richard is
going to do with his video driver or something, or his audio driver, because it's only when he, unless he's just putting it with that happening all the time.
Yeah, it's well, has he upgraded? He has upgraded like you, hasn't he?
Has he? I don't think so.
Oh no, perhaps not. Perhaps not. I thought he had. So he's just moved it, hasn't he? He's just moved his machine from downstairs upstairs, and it's last week and this week.
It might be something to do with that. Anyway, hello,
Richard. How are you?
I'm okay.
Jolly good.
What were you talking about then?
Ross was just talking about virtual reality, the state of virtual reality, his experiments with the Oculus Rift,
okay.
And how damned impressed he was about the whole situation, and
I saw the video of his fair lady having a go of it, which is very funny.
He did mention Nicola's exploits. What I didn't realise was that she doesn't like roller coasters in the first place. So using the roller coaster demo was, and what I was saying is, just before he dropped off air, was the fact that even though I'm skeptical about the whole 3D virtual reality thing in terms of how real it is, sometimes you can't fool your brain. Your brain is getting this sensory perception coming in, and you're getting these stomach movements.
Yeah, and I would love to try that, because I'm a bit like Nicola. Well, probably not, maybe not as bad as her, but I'd prefer not to go on a roller coaster if I had the choice. I would never choose one for pleasure, so I'd be interested. I've got the feeling, the intuition, that I would quite like the Oculus Rift, because I'm not on a real roller coaster. But it would be interesting if what you're saying, if the psychology is so powerful that it makes you feel like you really are one. Maybe it wouldn't be pleasant for us. I'd love to try it though.
Yes, you're back then, Ross.
I am back. Sorry, another blue screen there. I don't know what's going on.
Just as you went off, and I was trying to fill and get some get some sort of like stuff that I had kept for this eventuality, Richard popped up. So
excellent. But yeah, what I was just saying before I went there was the camera that comes with it does proper tracking, so you can move your head sort of in and out, and so it's not just sort of looking round in 360 degrees. It's proper positional tracking as well, which brings another dimension to it. You really, the first thing when you first install it, there's a demo scene that you look at, and it's just a table with plant and a cup and some cards stacked up, and you can sort of look round it. And the first thing you want to do is reach out and knock it down, though. That's the thing. So that's why you need those hand controllers, I think. But yeah, Richard, you should. If you get the chance, try the roller coaster, because it does give you, like John was saying, you do sort of get that feeling of, your stomach does feel the motion, even though obviously there's no motion.
I remember rides in Florida obviously taking advantage of this sort of 25 years ago now, probably, but they still do it, don't they? These 3D rides, and you obviously get a mix, don't you? You get the ones where you're in a thing that actually moves with the screen, which obviously makes it even more convincing. But you also get the ones where you're just stationary in a seat, and yet those still, when something jumps out of you, certainly So I guess it's just like a home. They finally made that portable and put it into the home, that level of technology, haven't they?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I remember the Terminator one being revolutionary when it first came out, about would it be the year 2000 or something like that in Florida, and in Universal Studios, and it was incredible. The 3D was absolutely amazing, and you were sitting in a seat, and they had like the seat was like on rails, so they just kept it so they didn't overdo it. So just like there was a part where there was an explosion and the level fell down, and the seat fell. It didn't actually go down, but in time with you going down on the screen, the seat went down, and they had like when the liquid metal Terminator exploded, it was like a giant spider, and when that exploded, they sprayed you with water, like a very fine mist at the same time. It was very well done, mind you.
Yeah.
I guess this is just like a home version then, is it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much.
So what's the state of play? You may not know this, Ross, but there's the Google have got one coming out, which is kind of a very like a sort of cut price one, isn't it? With like a cardboard mask and stuff.
Well, Google do the Google Cardboard. You can put your phone in it basically, so you can buy them online. The cardboard, and it comes with the lenses, and you just fold it all up, and then you put your mobile phone in. But Samsung, with Oculus as well, there's a Samsung one built for the Galaxy Note, I think it is. And again, that's it's just a container that you put your phone in. But I mean, the Oculus and the HTC one, they're just using mobile phone screens inside. But obviously, for the graphics that they want to do, you need something a bit more powerful than mobile phone processor. So they're still going to be using desktop PCs. It'll be good if they could get them wireless. I think that would be a big thing. Obviously, if they're looking to do these sort of like rooms where it can track the room, having a cable is quite, that could cause problems. You could end up snagging yourself in and that sort of thing. So if they do them wireless, I think that would be brilliant.
As you trip over the cable and pull over your computer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm surprised someone hasn't, just what you're saying, Google, is it a little bit surprising that no one's tried to acquire Oculus VR then? Or maybe they haven't tried to.
Facebook bought them.
Oh, they have? Oh, right.
Yeah,
Okay. Oh, yeah, you covered that previously, didn't you?
Yeah. I mean, I think Facebook did a conference or a talk just recently where they were talking about what they want to do with it. And what they want to do with it is like interactive 360-degree videos. So if you imagine doing something like teleconferencing, but you've got a 360-degree camera, and rather than just looking at a screen, you can have a headset on, and you can literally, you can look at the people in your meeting, or your friends and family and this sort of thing. So I think Facebook are very much pushing it as a social way of sort of like meeting with people, and being in the same room as them, as that sort of thing.
Sorry, I'm just posting a comment here. Rob C's on again, commenting on how wonderful it is to do things live and people drop off air and stuff. So, so that's interesting. Good, as always, it's good to get to keep up to date with things like this, and especially when we've touched on it before, and like you said, this is one of yours. You're becoming some sort of visionary. Ross, with this is how you predicted in January what was going to happen in the new year, and it's only April.
Definite purchase from me as well. As soon as the consumer versions come out with the barrel.
Yeah, I mean, even the development kit is only about 238 quid plus P&P, so it's not hugely expensive.
Yeah.
And you consider what something like this would have cost in the past as well. I mean, we're saying it's not. I mean, obviously £238 is a lot of money, but for what you're getting, and where the technology was 10 years ago, it's quite amazing. And isn't it interesting that it almost seemed as though people were losing faith with it, in that they're saying, VR in the home is never going to happen. You had Lawnmower Man and stuff like that. Can you remember that film? But it's took a long time to get to this point, but over the last 5 years it seems to have come on leaps and bounds, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. Well, this is the thing. Once sort of like a couple of firms get on board, like I say, Oculus was a Kickstarter project, but they've been bought by Facebook, and then Sony are doing one, and HTC are doing one, and that's it. There's no consumer versions out yet, but because the size of the companies that are investing in it, it will work. It will happen. What do you think?
What do you think the reason that it's sort of like kickstarted now is? That a company like Oculus has made some progress, and then the others have seen it and thought, "Hang on, we're going to miss out here. Let's all rush to market." Does that seem to be what's happened?
I think so. Yeah, I think because the technology's got the point where it is actually practical and it does work. that other companies have thought, oh, we better get in there now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But I mean, obviously, one would think that Oculus have a head start in terms of the R&D of something like that.
You would have thought so, but from what I've been reading, to be honest, the reactions from people who've used the multiple different systems, obviously I've just used the Oculus, from what I've been reading, people that say the HTC one, like I say, it's that extra level of interaction where you have the hand controllers. That makes a massive difference, and people are saying that really does make you feel like you are actually in that scene. Just, you get the presence from the VR and the 3D, but then actually being able to interact directly rather than using a controller just makes a massive amount of difference.
You imagine if Google decide they want to try and dominate the marketplace, though, that probably they'll succeed in that endeavor. Do you think?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like most things like that. If you've got a player such as the size of the Google and they want to get it in a marketplace, they just put loads of bods on it, because if they've got staff and really clever R&D staff all over the place, and just say there you go.
They'll just acquire.
They'll acquire somebody who's got that skill. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Right, excellent. Well, we'll leave that there, I think, and obviously come back to it as the new players to the market come out. Now, I don't know whether you want to go next, Richard. Are you?
Can do, yeah. Can do.
Right. So Richard is going to talk about the topic of genetics and voting, which sounds interesting.
Yeah, I thought this one did sound interesting, and my first reaction to it was surely not. And to be fair, it is just a indicative finding rather than, well, I mean, the paper is saying that it's strong findings, but anyway, I'll see what you think of it, and we'll maybe have a talk about whether we believe it or not. But basically, twin studies. So the Department of Twin Research, which hosts Twins UK, which is the biggest adult twin registry in the UK, they polled their twins, of which there are 2,355 of them, and they polled them to see what their voting preferences were. So these are twins all born in the UK, broadly representative of the UK. They were mostly middle-aged, but it was an age group between 18 and 80. So just a natural and unique experiment to be able to see voting preferences. So they looked at, obviously, identical and non-identical twins. So as you probably already know, identical twins share 100% of their genetic makeup. Non-identical twins are just the same as siblings, and from a genetic point of view, share 50% of the makeup. So what you would expect to see if there was a bias towards genetics, you would see preferences of the two twins being the same more often in the identical twins than in the control group of the non-identical twins. So that's what it's premised on, and indeed, they have. So voting Conservative or not is strongly influenced by genetics. So voting Tory, they found that 57% of the variability between voting was due to genetic effect. So basically controlling for all of what I just described, 57% of it, which is a lot. So Tory was the highest. UKIP, obviously we're talking about UK parties here. UKIP, moderately strong heritability of 51%, followed by Labour and Greens, both at 48%. And the exception seemed to be voting Liberal Democrat, which was affected entirely by environment, so no genetic basis whatsoever. And also they looked at whether you would or wouldn't vote, and found that has no inheritability either. So whether you go to the polls or not. Yeah, and previous studies have shown a similar thing, which this does make a lot of sense to me. This seems like it would be true, if you know what I mean. Genetic influences on right-wing views, so people who are strongly right-wing, for or against, that also seems to have an inheritability about it. So yeah.
Who were doing the statistical analysis? Which organisation were?
It was The Conversation, with the people who brought it out, which is just a website. They've basically brought out the results, but it was Twin Research who host Twin UK.
And it was everybody on that, all of the twins on that research, on that that register.
Yeah, yeah. All the ones who were polled. So
right.
the surveys were complete. No, there's more on the register than that. But
Right.
2,355 twins completed the register, which was 612 full pairs, basically.
So
Wow.
what's the reason behind the Tories being the genetically predisposed?
I don't think that they know. I think this
Give
is
a guess.
Go on, have a guess. What's your guess? Because I haven't even got a guess.
Well, it's supposed that the vast majority of Tory voters are inbred toffs.
I think if 57% is probably stretching it a little bit.
Oh, you with your accuracy.
But obviously, this study is a large one and has borne out what previous studies have shown. I mean, I'm not saying the Tories are strongly right wing, but of the centrist parties, of the big parties, they're the most right wing, and UKIP certainly are. Of the parties that we've got, I guess Americans and Europeans would laugh at this and say they're not right wing, but for the choices that we have in the UK, UKIP and Conservative are the right wing of the mainstream parties, aren't they? So that does seem to follow what previous studies have shown, which is that voting for or not voting for right wing has a genetic basis. So there's obviously something about that aspect of it. I don't know. I mean, just thinking about it now. I'm just taking a wild guess here, but I'm sort of thinking that genetics might have something to say about taking care of yourself and your close kin. In other words, people who are like you, whereas it's more of like a socially derived thing to care about others. So, like say immigrants, to learn to value them is kind of a learned nurture thing rather than a nature thing. That's kind of what I was wondering if it is, but I'm just totally guessing. Like I say, I don't know.
I mean, that sort of makes sense, I think.
Yeah. But it could be allegorical. I mean, it just sounds like it could be true. But yeah, I mean, there's been lots of these studies that make a lot of common sense, which is like psychology studies on bias towards leaders. So they also looked at which leaders they liked, and again, it was the Conservative leader who had the most genetic bias there. But other psychology studies have shown subconscious bias for tall leaders, handsome leaders, charismatic leaders.
You don't have any of them, do we?
We don't, really. Well, Ed Miliband's tall. I'm not sure about the other two things. Yeah. So what's your take on that then, Ross?
Well, I mean, like you say, your sort of like idea of the looking after your sort of close sibling type thing, perhaps being part of it, being that would make sense. But yeah, I've never thought of it. I've thought of it being sort of like, someone who's brought up in the same family is more likely to vote for the same party as your siblings. Because, I would have thought a lot of it would be more environment that, you're brought up thinking in a certain way.
And if that was true, then you would see in the non-identical twins, you'd see the same level of match. So this is taking that into account, and then it's even more of a match with the identicals, basically.
Exactly. Yeah, I've never thought of it being a sort of a genetic thing. So it would be interesting to see what, sort of further research into what they think the reason for this is. And obviously these are, are these what people actually vote for, or what they're going to vote for? You know what I mean?
I mean, it's what they're saying they're voting for. But I mean, I don't see why you would lie. I mean, I don't see why you would try and skew it. But I mean, I guess that's a factor.
Presumably, when they were questioned about this, and when they were asked the question, who you're going to vote for, presumably they did this without the knowledge of the other sibling.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually say that in the article that I'm reading from the conversation, but I'm assuming they did some sort of control on it.
Well, it would be slightly, it would be considerably flawed if they. It's like, well, I'll tell you once I've talked to my other half, the other sibling.
Well, unless they just contacted all the twins on the register and just asked them to express their voting preferences, and even then, if what you're saying was right, then people were in cahoots, you would still expect the non-identicals to go through the same. There's no reason why identicals would be in more cahoots than non-identicals. You know what I mean? So it would still, on a large number, would still average out, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I can't really talk one way or the other because I haven't got any siblings, so I have no, I mean, but you both do. So
I have no idea what my brother votes.
Well, I was going to ask that. I was going to ask that. Do you? Because you mentioned, Ross mentioned that some of it was definitely to do with your upbringing and your environment. And certainly in the area that we are, there's certainly people who I know who will only vote for a particular party, which
Labour.
is, well, in this area, yes, definitely very much Labour, and they will do it because their parents voted Labour and their parents' voted Labour, and that definitely colours their whole vision, and they haven't. Even in fact, I've heard people one used to assume that they were quite educated people, and had enough clarity of thought and enough eloquence to make up their own mind. But I've heard them say things like, "Well, obviously I'll be voting Labour, but I don't like them at the moment, but I'll be voting them obviously."
Yeah.
And it's like, well, why obviously?
Well, I guess this challenges that conventional wisdom, but in the wrong direction, really, in a sense of what progressives would like to be the case, because I guess this is saying not only are they not thinking for themselves, but really they're not even taking the influences from their upbringing. They're actually, the influences are predetermined in a sense, I guess you could say, because if it's genetic, then it's genetically determined, isn't it? If there's a genetic bias for something, then it's genetically determined. I tell you what, the only caveat that I was sort of thinking about is confounding factors. I just wonder a little bit about the parents of identical twins, whether or not, I mean, I'm maybe stepping way over the mark here. This is just something in my back of my head, but the parents of identical twins maybe have an urge to give them their own identities because they're identical. Maybe they have an urge to give them their own identities, and then by doing that, so basically they recognise a particular trait in one twin early on, and then try and bring that out more and give them that identity, so they don't realise that they're giving that twin that identity that's different from their sibling.
Is this for non-identical or identical?
No, for identical, I would have thought. So it would really
work
in the same direction as the...
I've seen so many occasions where our identical twins are dressed the same, and
well, yeah, well, okay, well that the same confounding factor, but in the other, all these confounding factors together. I'm not saying this one results in this outcome, but I just wonder about all those sorts of confounding factors. Like you say, with identical ones, do people dress them more and give them more of the same identity? And might that explain? Do they try and give non-identicals a separate identity? And might that explain? So maybe it isn't genetics in that. Maybe there's a confounding factor in there. But yeah, actually, what you said is more to the point than what I said. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's interesting. I wonder if we can, probably nobody's even thought about having these exit polls and having something like that tagged onto the end of exit poll. If you're, are you an identical twin? Yes, tick the box here. What did you vote for? But it's interesting.
Well, very powerful. Well, twin studies would appear to be a very powerful way of finding out about genetic inheritability because they are genetically identical, but. I don't know. If I had to guess, I would say that a lot of those results will get overturned in the future when we find out genetics is just not as simple as we first thought. But yeah, interesting all the same, isn't it?
It is indeed. Yeah. The nurture nature thing on many aspects is just really interesting. And
I think the most interesting thing about the nature versus nurture thing is that actually in modern biological studies that isn't really discussed because that's kind of like an old outmoded way of looking at it. It's not it's overly simplistic to even use those terms. So I think they've kind of stopped using that in the literature now because it's become a little bit misleading because it puts in the people's minds the either or, which it's often, you know,
there's the grey areas in between.
Yeah.
It's not just binary. Yeah.
We're finding out that environment influences your epigenetics as you get older, and so your genes are changing in line to what your parents' behaviour, your parents' consumption habits during their lives changes the genes that you inherit and things like that. So it's certainly not as clear cut as we first thought. So I guess that's a confounding factor as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like another confounding factor is, do Tory parents behave differently in a way that then might affect the inheritability? Who knows?
Excellent. Right, no, just fascinating. Right, now I'm going to go on to the last topic, although if this one might be a bit of a short one, so I've got a few little things that we can discuss afterwards if this is particularly short. But it's a topic that that I wanted to talk about because it's interesting from the point of, well, for everybody here, because it's something that we don't usually talk about in terms of we normally deal with what I would call more straightforward science topics like biology, chemistry, physics. But this is more of a thought of philosophy, theological sort of topic, and it's about religion, and it's about religion across the world. And it's a survey that was done by the British polling organisation Gallup. And it was basically to see if we are actually losing our religion, if the world is becoming less religious. And what I was going to do, I was going to throw this back to you and Ross and Richard, and just think, what would you think by instinct where the religious areas are and where the non-religious areas are? Can you put forward any sort of ideas where you think? And then I've got the results here, and I've got a map to show you to see if how close you are.
In the country or the world?
It's in the world. It's in the world. So
in the world. Well,
there are areas
sort of
you can be
Sweden and stuff like
areas, or you can be non-specific, or you can be specific to countries if you want.
Yeah. Sweden and Norway, non-religious, or less religious, I should say. America and Africa, very religious. That's what I would say. And UK, sort of in between.
Interesting. What about you, Richard?
Yeah, I think that's probably the conventional thinking, and that's all I can come up with really, is that Africa, surely, in the Middle East, surely are the most religious, and yeah, the Scandinavian type of countries. Although I'm always surprised when I travel, and often this, I've travelled to Sweden and Norway and found them to be quite religious. I don't know what the stats are, but my own personal experiences have been that they're quite religious. And Germany as well, I was surprised. We went to the Mosel Valley region, and there's these huge crosses all over the place, very Catholic country, and that took me by surprise. I didn't realise that about Germany at all. So I'm prepared to be wrong, so I really don't know.
Well, this is interesting because I like you, have been to Sweden, and Sweden have quite a, I was told that they have quite a big temperance movement, and which is the reason why you can't buy alcohol without going for an armed guards. Yeah, well, because all of their off licenses are state run, and they've all got armed guards on them.
You can only get like beer that's below 2.5% unless you go on a Sunday at 4 p.m.
so what I'm going to do is I'll show you the map now, and prepare to be, well, partially shocked, I guess. Because obviously, and this is the percentage of respondents in each country claiming to be either not religious or atheist. So the red means they are tending to be more non-religious, and the blue tending to be more religious. Now the biggest problem is, of course, in Africa, is because a lot of this is lot of these places have no data. We've got
Yeah.
no data collected from there.
But the bits that do have data are clearly as far along the scale as you can get.
Absolutely. But if you look at America,
I forgot to say South America, of course, that's clearly going to be religious as well.
well, yeah, so Canada is pretty much like most of Western Europe, which is kind of tending towards the more non-religious. But obviously places like China, which is
well, I think that one's a bit of a
because of the communist.
No, I think it's a little bit of a what do you say again? It's the way that you phrase the question, sort of thing, because they don't see it as a religion in this. It'll be interesting what they really mean by that, because I've had this debate with someone that we used to work with. It depends, because there's this whole they're very spiritual still, so they still believe in sort of non-humanist sources of morality and things like that, but they're not really what you would typify as religious. So that one might be a little bit misleading.
Yeah, they are a spiritual country, and they have a history of spirituality, but it's coloured by the communist regime. So it may be that they're not answering that truly.
Well, although you could argue with that with China, that is it really a communist country? I mean, it is technically, but I mean, they live. To me, it seems they live pretty capitalist lifestyles now, don't they?
But it's a communist country in that there's been no regime change since the Tiananmen Square massacre. So, as far as I'm concerned, that is business as usual. It may be that they have perceived.
So what you're saying is, if they were free to express religious identity, maybe they would get quite a strong religious identity then.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you the stats anyway. That so the headline stat is that 63% of the people polled across the world still say that they are religious, and they believe in some sort of omnipotent deity or God or something like that. China is the least religious country. We've just discussed that, and followed by Hong Kong, Japan, the Czech Republic, and Spain. The most religious countries are Thailand, which
Spain. Wow, I'm surprised at that.
That is quite.
In fact, when you showed us that graph, I'm not surprised by that at all, except for Spain. That's quite surprising. Yeah.
Yeah. So the most religious countries are Thailand, with 94% of the respondents from Thailand said they were religious. Armenia, Bangladesh, Georgia, and Morocco. They're all in the 90s. And then you've got things like, if you're taking it on.
I noticed that the Middle East is kind of no data as well, though, isn't it? Mostly because surely that's got to be, if you asked Jordanians and Libyans and surely those countries would all be very religious.
Yeah, absolutely. Africa and the Middle East are the most religious areas.
Yeah, but it's just no data on this particular picture.
Yeah. But if you're going for the least religious countries, well, as you can see by the graph, you've got Oceania here, the whole Australia and New Zealand. They're fairly non-religious, much like Western Europe is and Canada is of the same milk. But as you can see, the big red one here is in fact Sweden. So what you said, Ross, was accurate. But yeah, interesting. So I thought that would be a little.
So have they got previous stats for this? Is there a trend? Is there a downward, upward?
Well, that's
trend?
the problem. I don't think they have. I think this is their first one. I don't think they have previous stats. So
I have seen surveys, not this one, but I've seen surveys that in the United States, in the UK, in Europe, and in the world as a whole, that non-religious movement is definitely on the rise. And I know the UK one, it's the biggest mover, I think, followed by Islam, because obviously the UK is having immigration that's increasing the amount of Muslims. But I know in the UK, non-religion since the last, what's the one that we have again? The census. Yeah. Since the last census, non-religion definitely took a much bigger chunk.
But also, would you like to take a guess on the demographics of this of the split between atheism. Well, I'm not saying atheism, but say secularism, and
well, not even secularism, because that's something very specific as well, isn't it? Because that's basically saying you want separation of church and state. So is it not just non-religious?
Okay, a non-religious belief then.
Yeah.
So you know, the split is how you would think. I assume it's how you would think. It's certainly how I thought, in which that if you're from a sort of a less well-off background, that you believe in religion more, the tendency to believe in more religion. So if you have people with a medium to high income, say they are, you know, less than 50% say they are religious, where it's 70% of those with a low to medium income.
Mm-hmm. It's the same sort of thing.
It's the same within education as well. So if you've got a lower level of education.
Yeah. I was going to say, I bet the money one is probably just a correlation.
Well, the linked aren't.
I bet the causation is actually education.
Yeah.
Money just correlate. Money just correlates with education, doesn't it? Normally.
Yeah, I mean, the stat here is that those without what is considered an education are 80% of those are most religious, and the religious people are a minority for anything with above that.
I know in the sciences, just to kind of maybe bring it into a little bit of like what we normally talk about, I know in the sciences that compared to the general population, I mean, this is of course what you would expect, but it should still be said, because religious people will often make the claim, oh well, there's, you know, the most esteemed astronomer in the world at the moment is religious, or the most esteemed whatever, the guy who led the Human Genome Project is very religious, blah blah blah. So people say this all the time, but it's still true to say that the amount of non-religious people in the sciences compared to the population at large is much higher. The amount of non-religious people within the biological sciences who would, you know a bit more about this area and understand the basis for these sorts of things, maybe non-religious is a lot higher there. And then specifically within evolution and, you know, those fields, the amount of non-religion is very, very high. So it flips, you know, when you look at America where it's something like 80-20, it flips to 90-10 the other way when it comes to those biological sciences. So you might expect that, but I think to me it's quite a powerful tool to argue, to counteract that point where they say, oh well, but there's these eminent scientists who are very religious. I think that makes a much better point as well. Okay, but they're the exception to the rule. The rule very strongly is scientists tend not to be religious.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we were talking about this not so long ago, weren't we, Richard? There was I can't remember who the scientist was, but there was an astronomer who is religious, and he was being asked, how do you resolve that whole thing of being a scientist and looking at the universe and knowing that, you know, the universe is billions of years old with your religious beliefs? And he was basically saying that they're two completely separate things.
Yeah.
And he doesn't. There's no crossover. So he's religious and he's a scientist, and
it's what
he's quite happy with having that separation of concerns, or what you would call it.
What Stephen Jay Gould labelled non-overlapping magisterium, which
that's the one, yeah.
Dawkins was his main critic on that, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he would have had many critics, no doubt, but Dawkins was his main vocal, where they went back and forward and really fell out. Of course, Gould's died now, but yeah, he wasn't religious himself, but he felt very much that the two things don't have to overlap. So that's a debate that still rages on. Should it be, clearly that person, everyone agrees, well, I shouldn't say everyone agrees, but he is still a great scientist and his work is still very worthwhile. But does it create a conflict of interest? How do you square that cognitive dissonance between what you believe and what you're seeing for a fact with your eyes? It is an interesting one that a few people, but some people do seem to be able to live with those two contradictory ideas, but it does happen.
Excellent. Well, I thought that's an interesting topic. It's one we haven't touched on before, and probably one that's, I mean, very well maybe a topic that we shouldn't have touched on, but it's interesting because of the fact that we are all, I guess, it's fair to say non-believers. So.
Pretty much.
I don't think we've said anything controversial. Well, I always think that I've not said anything controversial, though. So I don't think we've said anything particularly controversial. I'm actually surprised that it's as non-religious as it is on that graph.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But like you were saying, Ross. I mean, what would be great if we had another set of poll results to compare it with, and I don't think we've had those. Now, if this is going to be an ongoing sort of a poll, which incidentally the whole total of there was nearly 64,000 people polled for this. So it's I think there's about 1,000 in each country, I think it was, or approximately 1,000 in each country. So it's a fair old demographic.
Well, I think slightly bigger sample than that, maybe.
Yeah, well, it's very hard though, I guess, to get.
Well, my prediction,
something like that.
My prediction is that Islam will be making the most ground, followed by non-religion, and I think non-religion will be taking the ground of Christianity in the main. I don't think non-religion will be taking any ground from Islam. That's my.
Yeah, I mean, the natural question from these results were, what's the split of religions within the religion? And like you say, it's probably fairly conclusive that the Muslim religion is growing.
Yeah, I think that's got to be surely is the fastest growing one of the lot.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it depends if you include Scientology. I suppose that would, out by raw numbers, would have to be, wouldn't it? 'Cause since it's so small and new. But in terms of just net numbers, surely Islam's the fastest growing one.
Excellent. Right. Well, we should leave that there now. And here's me worrying about the fact that it might be a bit short tonight. But no, we've done it again. We've managed to break the 45-minute barrier quite comfortably, actually. So anyway, yes, I've enjoyed that tonight quite a lot, and I guess the guys have here. If you've enjoyed it, please drop us a line. As ever, we've been showing the Twitter handles for each of us all evening, and we've also got the email address wonderofstuff@gmail.com. If you can give us any feedback, positive and negative, any topics that we want us to cover, that's great. Send it into there. We've all got connection into that mailbox. We've also got the URL, which is wonderofstuff.blogspot.com, which we'll have the show notes on. Anything that we find interesting that we'll put a mid section, so in between the two vodcasts, we can put stuff on there. There's a reading list. There's a bit about us, various stuff on there. So that we're going to add to that as over the weeks. So again, thank you very much to Richard and Ross, and we'll see you again next time. Say goodbye, chaps.
Goodbye, chaps.
Bye, chaps.